What's going on? What's going on? Happy Tuesday to you. Happy Tuesday. This is your homework support for EL 5.3, where we looked at using exposition. So continue that work using exposition to help us predict possible outcomes in the climax. So I'm actually going to go through the notes that we took today and then talk through the models so you know exactly how to go through this. And then maybe kind of just throw in some ideas or thoughts for the particular assignment you may be doing. All right. So first, let's go ahead and present this. Go past all of that. When we were talking about the climax, we were talking about the point in the story where a lot of things happen. There's a lot of movement. A lot of people say there's a lot of drama, a lot of action. That's definitely true. But today we decided to extend climax, being it's like the peak or the middle of the story where your main character is going to go through some change. And that change is going to be specific to whatever that goal is from the beginning of the story, what you learned in the exposition. Remember, exposition is the beginning of plot where you understand your main character, where you understand the setting, where you understand his or her goal for the entire story, what it is that he or she will be doing or trying to accomplish throughout this story. And so in the climax, we get to a point where something changes with this goal in the main character. And there's three ways to think about this. You can think about a change in terms of their thoughts or their feelings about the goal. You can think about change in terms of their actions, in terms of how they go about completing the task or go about achieving this goal. Or you can think about changes in her life, his or her life, and whether the entire goal just takes a shift into something new, or if the goal just ends and that leaves the main character with something new to look forward to. Now, in addition to that, what you had to do today is this was your focus. This was thinking about here are the ways that climax changes characters. Now, what I need to think about, or what you need to think about as readers, is trying to understand how am I going to use it to think about possible outcomes in the climax? Because you have to just really predict. You have to really think. And so we talked about three ways of going about this. Either one, you could think about the main character's trait. So maybe the character's trait changes from the exposition to the climax when it comes to this particular goal that he or she is trying to accomplish, or the impact. So whatever or whomever was influencing the main character to take part or take charge or go towards this goal, maybe something happens where that impact changes in the climax. And then lastly, we're thinking about the perspective. So however the main character feels about his or her goal in the beginning of the story, maybe those feelings change by the middle with the climax. And when we talked about this, we said we don't need all three. And we really want to make sure that you go with something that you definitely understand. So if you don't understand your character's trait, you're not going to touch trait. So that means you're automatically going to think about what's an impact and what's a perspective. And so really go with what you definitely know, what is clear to you when you read the text, and then continue to complete the task. Now, with that completion, we're talking about this model here. And so, as you notice, everyone had this. And you want to start with your goal, obviously, first. So being very clear in terms of what is the goal that my character wants. What does this character want by the end of the story? So start there first. Then, again, we have our trait, impact, perspective. So now we have all the ways in which that character can change based on climax. Now, this first column here, this is almost a summary, basically. So it's like you really think about your exposition and just breaking down your thinking. And so I use Oberon from The Dying Oath, and we know that he wants to get away from the war. And so one trait of his that kind of like told me that he possibly wants to get away from the war, and really think about how the text informed you of this, how the text made you think about or infer this goal. So still thinking about how we looked at exposition. So Oberon seems to be aloof. He's someone who shows disinterest due to disliking an activity. You see it, I'm not going to read it all, but I feel like this, knowing that he's not interested in the war because he's ignoring everything that's happening with the war, and he's also not even fighting in the war, maybe he doesn't want to be there. So that was one thing. His trait made me think that he doesn't want to be there. In terms of the impact, I feel like his setting maybe told is a place. The setting is a place where I feel like I wouldn't want to be, so maybe he doesn't. The fact that all around him there were screams of people dying, and he's constantly telling himself to ignore those screams, as if to say, just they're not there. You don't. I just wish I wasn't here. Just ignore what's happening around me, and that made me think that he didn't want to be there. And then perspective, and that's, I feel like when we have it really simple, positive or negative, in this case, we're saying that he didn't have a positive attitude. He didn't think positively about this war. Why? Well, because he didn't participate and he was ignoring. So things kept coming in. As you notice, we have this ignoring and not participating thing coming all the way through. And so that told me that, yeah, maybe he does. He just wants to be away from the war. And so I want to start with this. I want to start with my summary, and I need to choose two of these to then think about how I could possibly think of something happening in the climax. Before it even happens, what's my prediction? I feel like trait is hard for some people. Trait's most difficult, so I always do trait last. I think it's easier to think about the other two. It's easier to think about how did the character feel? How does the character feel? How does the character think when it comes to the goal in the exposition, and then how could that change in the middle, or what things or what people are making or forcing him to want to go forth with getting away from the war, getting away from the goal, and how can that change. So I started with the impact, obviously, and I said, well, if in the beginning he's ignoring the screams, I feel like in the climax, I can see him actually doing the opposite. I can see him actually responding to the screams and maybe wanting to just take part. So I focus on the idea of him ignoring and not participating. I feel like now he wants to take part. He's not going to ignore anymore because he's like, I can't. No matter how hard I try, they're going to still be there. And since I can't get away from the war, I might as well do something to keep these screams from annoying me. And so one possibility, and it makes sense, is that maybe he starts to take part in the war and begins to kill people, take them out of their misery so they're not screaming. From there, I have to think about a second because we always have two pieces of evidence. So what are two other possible predictions for climax? And we noticed, I'm sorry, and we said this was an action. So make sure we understand that his action changed from not doing anything and from ignoring to actually not ignoring and doing something. So I gave us these options, and as you read through, it's like, well, which one's better? And we want to make sure that when you're thinking about conflict, although it can happen, we want to just stop it today and not really think too much. There are moments where where your goal or your conflict is solved in the climax. And so even though we're saying the entire story is about your main character defeating someone or accomplishing something, sometimes it may happen in the climax, which then tells readers we're not done. Something else is going to brew, something's going on. What am I looking forward to for the other half of the story? And that's kind of what B does. B kind of gives this idea of his goal being met, the fact that he gets away from the war, or he decides to run away due to the screams of people dying, being too much for him. But again, today we want to try to not use that. We want to try to find things that did not inform us that the story was over. So we definitely crossed off B. In C, what we know is that C pretty much changes the entire goal. This is our goal. Our goal is not trying to win this war, having victory in this war. And so C was just off because C changes the entire goal for the main character. It doesn't fit with what we're talking about, which then makes A the best answer because A definitely, one, it makes sense from the trait. If I'm being disinterested in the beginning, I may start to be interested more in the climax because if I know I want to get away, maybe me starting to fight and starting to get deaths quicker is going to help me get out of the situation quicker. And so A, and just the way I thought about it, that action is what possibly could change in the exposition. So that's my second one. So now I have A as a possibility, and I have this impact here as a possibility. And that was your goal today. And so pretty much that's all you did. You use your text or using Tell the Three Brothers. You want to think about what kind of people, what trait would you give the three brothers while they're trying to avoid death in the story. A lot of people went with clever or smart, and so that's fine. And so knowing that or understanding how they use their cleverness or how they use their smartness to not die or to try to stay alive. And then think about within in the climax, what trait may happen, what trait may actually happen to change. That's a change from who they are in the beginning of the story. Artemis Fowl, we know that they want to use the book um, to restore their family's fortune, and we find that out on page 29 as we go further into the book. And so now thinking about, well, we know trait for Artemis Fowl is a little difficult, so we went with impact and perspective. And so really thinking about what kind of family does he come from and how that family may be an impact on why he decided to use this book to restore his family's fortune. That could be something to use. I know a few people did use that in our small group today. And so really thinking about that as well. And then what could happen. If I have some family background that's probably helping me out, what about that background could definitely change, which then can also change the character. And I think that's really important to think about too. What's a key word that you're using in your summary that you need to focus on to be the change in the climax? In this case, I kept focusing on the thing about participating. So I feel like his participation, his action would change more in terms of wanting to participate or not ignoring anymore. Same thing. If I'm thinking about Artemis Fowl, what is something that you need to focus on that you can say, I think this key word or this key phrase could cause change or could change in the climax. And so that's pretty much it. I hope that this was helpful and that you definitely can complete your homework in the best way possible. Alrighty, good luck on that.